Blizzie Knows best. Cross-realm zones? This is MultimediaJay radio style for Monday, September 30th, 2019. Let's start the show.
MultimediaJay radio style.
So this is the part where I confuse the heck out of people as to why on earth I could possibly say that a concept like Blizzie Knows best applies to cross-realm zones. Such an innocuous feature, it's a feature that repopulates zones that don't have a lot of players from your server with players from other servers. It's been around since Mists of Pandaria. How could I possibly say Blizzie Knows best when it comes to cross-realm zones? How could I say that a feature as near transparent nowadays as CRZ, how could I possibly say that this feature is an example of it? Well, if you look at the hoopla behind it from the original developer article, which I will be linking in the description, if you look at the hoopla behind it and what Blizzard did and how Blizzard treated this feature when they rolled it out, it's actually a perfect example of the pattern of Blizzard's hubris and, of course, the player base reacting negatively as usual that I've come to associate with this kind of phenomenon, which all of these little things combined together are basically death by 1,000 pinpricks for World of Warcraft versus its competition. As I was researching for this discussion, I was reminded that it wasn't always this way. Blizzard hasn't always been trying to reinvent the wheel and being clever for being clever's sake, or cleverness' sake, however you want to say it. Once upon a time, Blizzard was a standard setter with WoW, and other games were trying to outdo Blizzard and falling flat on their face. A great example, and this is something that WoW players, regardless of whether you've played or not in the last several years, should be familiar with. It's such a simple baseline feature that it's hard to imagine a game without this in it that's an MMO. Auction houses. Blizzard got it right with the auction house thing. Of course, there's add-ons that automate certain things, and some of the stuff that's in the add-ons has made its way into the default auction house UI, but Auctioneer and Auctionator are still around, and there's Auction Faster as well. But the simple idea of an auction house was actually something that Square Enix tried to one-up with Final Fantasy XIV version 1.0 with the Market Wards. It was like wandering around a flea market, wandering between all of those NPCs, retainers actually, to see who's selling what do I want to buy, who has the best price, then go back to the person you want to buy it from if you can remember it all, and do they still have it? The modern analog to this is Elder Scrolls Online, sadly enough, with the guild vendors. There is no real centralized auction house at ESO. It's decentralized between various vendors. Fortunately, there's third-party websites like Tamriel Trade Center that you can use to essentially get auction house functionality. So you're looking for something, here's the best price for it. It was listed this long ago by this guild vendor in this part of the world. I'm going to fast travel out there, see if they still have it, and get it. So you have the equivalent of an auction house, but you have to use third-party tools to do so. And then there's the whole trading guilds thing, which is a completely artificial construct brought about by the existence of this system when Blizzard, through the auction house, has had this question answered for many, many years. And it's appalling that there are still games out there that are trying to be clever and one-up Blizzard when Blizzard figured this out many years ago. It's one of the few issues that I have with ESO, aside from some other issues with AI and the world difficulty. I know ESO isn't perfect, and it has its flaws, just like any other game. But what we have here, of course, is just an example of some situations where once upon a time, Blizzard got it right, and other people and other developers and other games were the ones that were trying to reinvent the wheel and falling flat on their face. Not so much the case nowadays. Cross-realm zones, if you look at the developer article, which I'm linking to in the description, what you will see here is Blizzard turning what is essentially a Band-Aid fix for their own server infrastructure into this wonderful new feature. And remember what I said, what I've been saying throughout this Blizzie Knows best stuff, that people who are fishbowled by playing just World of Warcraft are not going to have a proper perspective to see this for the cheese job that it is. Cross-realm zones are a half-cooked answer to what other games have been doing since Mists of Pandaria with mega servers, and even Final Fantasy XIV nowadays, with its emphasis on data centers, more so than individual servers. It's a baby step away from servers making or breaking your MMO experience, but it's not the mega servers that you see in ESO and Guild Wars 2. To be fair, Mists of Pandaria and Guild Wars 2 are pretty contemporary to each other in terms of when they launched and they, people saw whether their ideas worked or not. So there was really no reason for Blizzard to think that ArenaNet was going to have the better ideas with Guild Wars 2 back when Mists of Pandaria was in beta. So maybe at the time, cross-realm zones might have seemed interesting, but it aged very, very quickly. Today, cross-realm zones, like what we're seeing in our screenshot of the day of some folks from various servers hanging around Goldshire, some are dueling, some are showing off gear, some are showing off mounts. Usually most of the people in Goldshire are shooting the Breeze Alliance side. Heck, there's even Horde characters that stay just out of the aggro radius of the guards that'll stand around sometimes when I'm over there. And they're always from all different servers. But all of this isn't really necessary if Blizzard ever caught up to other games in terms of infrastructure, in terms of tearing down the walls between servers. Because servers, they had their day, but their day has passed. Servers were basically a limit on how you could run the infrastructure for an MMO in the early days of World of Warcraft. But competitors have moved beyond that, and yet WoW, even today in Battle for Azeroth, still maintains some kind of significance with your server that even Final Fantasy XIV has moved away from. I was very harshly reminded of this when I went glyph shopping for my priest on Terralion US medium pop server, and the auction house actually was running out of what I was looking for. I was like, do I want this glyph? Maybe I should try that glyph. No, I want to go back to this glyph, the glyph of Shadow for Smita, the priest. And there were no more glyphs of Shadow. The auction house ran out. And I know that on low pop realms, this is even worse. There's either nothing that you want to buy, or you can try to sell and nothing will ever sell because everything takes forever. Because the economic side of the game is still by server, even though cross-realm zones for years have been boosting the social aspects of things in terms of who can see each other in the outdoor world. But if you decide to go read this article from the Mists of Pandaria beta, assuming you haven't seen it already, as to cross-realm zones and how Blizzard went around parading, oh, look at this wonderful new feature we're adding to WoW, it's particularly haunting if you scroll down to the comments and you see what people were saying in 2012 about, oh, the game doesn't need this, this is a stupid idea, blah, blah, blah. And some of the things that people say in the comments are hauntingly similar to issues that still exist today. Like, one of the things that people had a problem with cross-realm zones was, well, I don't need people to help me quest. Leveling up is easy. It's actually boring and grindy. It's not all that interesting. I don't need help leveling up. Why do I need more players to get in my way when I'm trying to level up? Sounds like Battle for Azeroth. Except this was many years ago at this point. The better part of a decade ago. And this problem still persists. But hey, Blizzie knows best. So it may be a rather passive example, but cross-realm zones are a very valid example of this phenomenon and how it holds this game back, because all of the elements are there. You have the big publicity push, Blizzard acting like this is some wonderful thing, when in reality it aged very, very quickly, and nowadays cross-realm zones are very half-cooked compared to something like mega servers. Because, I'm a longtime veteran of your experience getting made or broken by what server you're on. In my day, there were, I sound like I'm old, and I actually am, so. Actually, my involvement in World of Warcraft predates this YouTube channel by several months. That's another discussion entirely. Same thing with the me being old stuff. But I remember good server versus bad server, and Alex Straza, aka Drama Straza, when I was first leveling through this game for the first time, was one of the bad servers. There were progression guilds, but there was a ton of drama in the trade chat. There was drama in the guilds. There was drama on the Realm forums. And if you created little level 1 alts and parked them in Stormwind across several different servers, you could see the difference between the crap going on Alexstrasza, aka Dramastrasza, and something like Storm Rage, which I eventually transferred to. And there are some other servers as well. You could just watch the trade chat, bounce between level 1 alts, and see who had the drama and who didn't. Which server was full of players that would explode into trade chat as soon as they could, the minute you made them even the tiniest bit upset in a dungeon or a raid or PvP or something. I was rather harshly reminded of this earlier in the year with Final Fantasy XIV, because the server that my characters got moved to when my Final Fantasy XIV 1.0 server shut down due to server consolidations, again, actual server closures happen in failing MMOs like the original version of FF14. But as it turns out, the server that my characters were moved to was a high pop server, and I didn't want to deal with queues, so I took some free character moves to another server in the data center, and then found out the hard way, both in-game and out-of-game, through Discord and discussion forums and stuff like that, as well as Google searches and stuff, that I had joined a bad server, and there was a very toxic community on the server, and they were infamous for all of these issues. And anybody who didn't want to be lumped in with this nonsense should just transfer off as soon as possible. It's the same thing, too, where if you have a bunch of bad people on a server that are highly geared, and they basically got where they are by being jerks to people who had to have them in the party because they know how to play the game, and they know how to play the system, so that people are forced to have to put up with them because they're geared or what have you. When you get to the point where people are leaving servers because they don't want to deal with certain raiders who are the gatekeepers to certain kinds of content, that's when you'll start seeing the whole issue with why servers can be such a problem versus data centers or mega servers. You can't really have such a death grip, so to speak, on people's fun when everybody from North America is playing in the same area and things aren't split off by server, like there have been in games like WoW in years gone by. You can't really get away with some of that nonsense that ruins other people's fun when everybody is together on one group of hardware and basically there's more fish in the sea, so to speak. Oh, I don't like playing this game with those people or that guild or those people that cause drama. Let's go over here and see what this is like. And just keep wandering around until we find a place where we actually fit in. That's just an example from my experience as to how servers can really hold things back and why I have supported the development of MMOs over the years away from servers towards things like mega servers and data centers, where you don't have these artificial walls of, you're from a good server, you're from a bad server, etc. But where do cross-realm zones fit into this kind of progression curve? Answer: they're barely a step forward, but they're still a step forward. So this artificial feature of, oh, we're going to artificially bring people in from other realms, but you're still not going to be able to trade or do auction housing with them or something or what have you. So all of this, the server still matters, but not in terms of whether or not the zones have people in them. That is a half-cooked version of combining server populations together so that you have the benefits of a high-pop realm without having the infrastructure issues of a high-pop realm. And this is another type of improvement to World of Warcraft that Blizzard has left on the table. Just like what they could do with their Connected Realms technology to make server queues a thing of the past by engaging in basic IT load balancing, by combining a big server with queues galore with a tiny server that's essentially a dead realm. Connect them together, offer free character moves from the big server to the little server until the populations balance out. If both servers get too big, add a third empty server and level those out until you have a decent player population on all the servers. That's basic IT load balancing. And yet we haven't seen that with the Connected Realms technology. But even the Connected Realms technology is a step forward, but not a big step forward compared to mega servers. I mean, the whole reason why you'd want to play an MMO is to be involved in this escapist fantasy world, whether it's medieval fantasy or fairy tale fantasy or sci-fi or whatever, with lots of other folks and not have to deal with AI all the time. It's the massively multiplayer part that makes MMOs what they are. So the more that these games can do that, the better they'll be in terms of doing what this genre is supposed to be about. Servers and other artificial boundaries caused by infrastructure are not conducive to that. Now that the technology is out, we should be looking at ways for these games to move forward, and in the case of games that are further along in the curve, catch up to the front runners. But do we see that with Blizzard? No, we see old stuff sticking around, and then little baby steps forward being paraded around like Cross-Realm Zones was, and Connected Realms and other stuff. But that's the pattern, and that's what to look for in terms of understanding what I'm talking about. Look at the ways in which Blizzard parades around features as these nice new things, when in reality they're not as nice as what's elsewhere in the MMO world. And these are the sorts of things that will, what better word is there but seduce players who are too fishbowled by what Blizzard has done to this game and don't have a proper perspective on things. Cross-Realm Zones may seem like a very innocuous feature, but it is very representative of this ongoing problem that Blizzard has had with World of Warcraft for years, and will continue to have until things change with the philosophy and the leadership at Blizzard and all the other stuff that sets the rules for how this game exists. This is MultimediaJay Radio Style. Don't touch that dial.